Got it. Okay. And I don't think it's too loud. Is it too loud for the Zoom folks? Sound good? Okay, well then I'll just get started, okay? Okay. So, Wayne's the runner if we get in trouble. Okay, so good evening. We're going to get started. Well, we hope we're going to get started. My name is Rich Fairbanks, and I own 20 acres out in Little Applegate. And I've got a lot of background in forestry, mostly fire, and I also have a great deal of bug kill on my property, the flathead borer. And so necessity is the mother of invention, and I came up with this method, and one of my neighbors, John Gallego, also uses it. It's been successful on more than one property, and so I thought I would share it. And so that's what I'm doing. And the title of the presentation is Removing Dead Trees from Steep Ground. And that's my property. Just about all these slides are my place, and it doesn't really show how steep it is, but it sure shows how dead the trees are. And you can see I got a lot of the falling done, and the big question is how to deal with stuff when it's dead like this on steep ground. Some of those trees weigh 2-3 tons. As you can see, we've already got the limbs and tops cut up, and they're ready to burn there. And I obviously use slash paper, not plastic. And I'm going to identify the problem. We have large amounts of tree mortality in Southwest Oregon. That's obvious to everybody. Drought plays a major role. The flathead borer, phanops type bark beetles, are very active right now. I believe Max Extension here did a presentation the other day. They are pretty sure that it's climate linked. And so we're expecting some science to come out at some point showing that link. Of course, bugs like warm weather, you know, yeah. Anyway, and where there are concentrations of snags near homes and evacuation routes, it may be wise to treat them. Well, that's been my opinion now for the last 5 years. This drought, that's what I've been doing, is trying to keep the fuel profile reasonable near my house and near the road that I would leave on, and my neighbors would leave on. And I believe that this can be done, this treatment to deal with the fuels, the fire aspect especially, can be done with a minimum of site damage, soil damage especially, and with minimum disruption of wildlife habitat. So to go a little further into the problem, fuels, that's kind of my background. And this is my lucky slide. I managed to work this into almost every PowerPoint. One of the squad leaders on the Lost Fire in 1977, that's me on the right, the little fellow with the hard hat and the radio strap, the round hard hat. And this is my very first backfire that they put me in charge of. And you can't see it in the slide, but I'm scared. I am really scared. And it worked, but it almost didn't, because we had so much. You can see the overstory there in the upper right of the photo. You can see there's some big, tall fir and sugar pine and whatnot, but mostly it's all this second growth after they logged the overstory. And it's got a tremendous amount of fine fuels in the crowns, and they're in a ladder formation, so they go all the way from the surface to the tops of the trees, and so you get this kind of fire behavior, which is very difficult to deal with. We were able to hold this that day, but just barely, by our fingernails, were we able to hold it. And that's because with standing trees, the crowns contain a lot of small diameter fuel, 0 to 3 inch diameter. Those fuels have very high surface area to volume ratio. That means they can very quickly combine with oxygen. It also means they're sensitive to changes in moisture, but that's another story. The point is, fine fuels can really rip, put it in a nutshell. Large fuels, whether standing or down, such as tree trunks and stuff, they don't contribute very much to that very rapid rate of spread and the crown fires and so forth. But they have a big influence on what we call resistance to control. In other words, if it's a down log, you got to have somebody come in with a chainsaw that works and cut that log up and roll it out of the way to build a fire line. If it's standing, you got to have a set of fallers, or in many cases, half a dozen sets of fallers, go through first and fell the trees that might land on the crew. Because by nature, fire crews, when they're digging line, they're looking down, not up. So you got to deal with both the fine fuels and the large fuels. And whoops, don't do that. Sorry. What was the name of that band? Badfinger? Remember them? Yeah. Anyway, and then one other thing, when logs that are down get old and rotten and punky, they can be part of the fire rate of spread, and they can greatly increase the cost of mopping up that fire. And sometimes they can also cause heat damage to soils because they're rotten and punky enough, so they'll burn hot and they'll burn for days, and they'll cook your mycorrhizae and such like. So fuel is a problem. The way I chose to address the problem on my little 20 acres is to remove appropriate amounts of fuel from strategic locations. And for me, this was trees within 250 feet of the house. As you can see the house in the background, and you can see that as a steep little canyon full of bug kill down below my house. And also, I wanted to deal with trees that could fall on the evacuation route, which you can't see in this picture. Okay, so what I chose to do, just press it once, Rich. Somebody come and hold my finger behind my back, is some tools. Yes, sir, go ahead. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, yeah. The thinning questions are really not related to this, but you're right. Generally, a full crown has more fuel in it and can do more hot burning than one that's real suppressed and has a lot of has very little crown. But anyway, we'll get back. Yeah. So the tools that you need to do what I've been doing are for your personal self: boots, gloves, shatterproof lenses on your glasses, ear protection, and a lot of people wear chaps. I personally, unless I'm in the brush, I don't find them useful. But definitely ear protection and eye protection. How anybody could start a chainsaw without having that, I just think they're taking a chance of walking around with a cane for the rest of their life. Anyway, so personal protective gear, real important. The other kind of tools is you need chokers. The particular one on the upper left, the red one is 15-footer. I've got a 6-footer and I've got a 50-footer. So I've got a selection of different length chokers. That'll make more sense when you start actually doing this. Then in the photo on the right with me up the ladder there, that yellow thing is a tree saver strap. It's about 3 inches wide. It's made out of cordura, and it tremendously reduces rub marks and damage to the bole of the tree. And it also is super handy because it can stand out several feet from the trunk of the tree when you apply tension to it. You'll see as the slides roll by. And then the all-important pulley, or as we call it in the woods, the block. And if you got one of these, you can pick up logs and move them all over the place. If you got 2 of them, you can log around corners. It's really cool. So you need a couple of blocks, choker, tree saver, the tree ladder, which in my case, I went with this very expensive sectional aluminum ladder that you see here on the left in the back of the truck. Oh, I keep doing that. In the back of the truck, this breaks down into 6-foot sections. So 3 of them that I bought, I can get up about 18 feet up in the tree, and it makes all the difference in the world. But anyway, so that's what the tree ladder is all about. You can also, as my neighbor John did, he went and got a ladder for deer hunting, for tree stands, you know, a ladder to get you up to because deer don't look up. So that's how he did it, and it was a lot cheaper, I must admit. So there's several ways you can get a hold of that ladder, but you do need that height. And then you need, obviously, the winch, which right there on the back of the pickup, that is a Warren 8000 winch. It's about 25 years old. I had it rebuilt a couple of years ago. The company's up in Portland. That's where their factory is. Interesting people, the Warren people. And they did a beautiful job rebuilding it. It's incredible what that thing will pull. Just incredible. Anyway, and then, of course, some chain. You need various lengths of chain. And a hook on each end is real handy to have. You'll see what I mean if you do this. Okay. The basic idea is you're changing the angle of force by making a high lead, i.e. a spar tree, a block hung high in a spar tree. And here you can see it's picked up this rather heavy log completely off the ground, and it's just waiting for me to move forward or back with the winch, with the force. That's just any tree that you've rigged up high enough so you've changed the angle of the force. And for the first 100 years of logging in Oregon and Washington, spar trees were the standard way you logged steep ground, was you got up high enough so the logs didn't drag, didn't plow. It was just much faster. They didn't care about the soil back then, but they knew it was a much faster way to move wood. It reduces the plowing, it reduces the weight on the soil, it reduces the force needed to move the log. And I do want to apologize to the Forest Engineering Institute at OSU. I took their short course on cable logging systems, and I'm sure I've mangled some of the physics of this, how they explained it to me. But it works, and that's what's important. So in addition to having that tremendous advantage of the spar tree, the block up 20 feet, so you've changed the angle of the force you're applying to the log. You want to reduce the friction with a skidding cap. And these are incredibly useful. It's high-density polyethylene. It's very slick, certainly compared to bark. It's very slick. And it just makes things, you see how it goes over the end of the log. The choker is set inside of that, basically. And you stick it through the hole in the end and attach it to where your force is coming from, your winch line. And it just rides over the brush rather than tearing into it. And when it gets to a tree like this, it goes around it, kind of. Just a really, really handy item, and it's called a skidding cap. And somebody in the audience said that they had bought one too, so I know they're available. Anyway, so the high lead, that is the spar tree with the block up 20 feet or so, combined with the skidding cap, allows the movement of many logs relatively quickly. And again, you see in this photo on the left there, I got a lot of dead and down near my house, and it's on a steep slope. But on the right, you can see I can move a lot of logs up to the road fairly quickly. Certainly far quicker than I could do it by dragging them behind an ATV or something like that. So there's some things I do to get a more efficient operation. And one of them is if I'm going to do saw log length, in other words, I'm not going to cut them up into firewood as soon as I get them to the road, then we really need to plan ahead. And in this case, I'm trying to make an 18-foot spar handle a 22-foot log, and it's not working. And eventually I did have to trim that log a little bit. The vast majority of the wood that I cut goes to firewood, as you see the rounds on the left there, and I donate it down at the Jackson County Fuels Committee. And I also trade for eggs, and I traded for a craniosacral therapy session. And well, anyway, you can trade firewood for all kinds of stuff. You'll find out. You'll see. What's that? Okay, yeah, good idea. Yeah. Anyway, I once got a lawyer for a half a quart of a drone. Yeah, he just advised me on something, but still. No. Okay. Anyway, okay. You can just take a couple of boards like you see in this photo, and make an inclined plane. And with a PV, you can roll just one little guy like me. You can roll a 500-pound log up and onto a stack and get them out of the way, so you can efficiently use that method, pioneered by the ancient Egyptians building the pyramids. Okay, and you will find that this is really kind of important. Roads are where you're going to store this stuff until you get a chance to cut it up or trade it for eggs or whatever, and being able to stack them is really nice. And yeah, you can see there the photo on the right. We were just making stacks all day, going up and down that road. And we wound up giving all that away for firewood, kind of a U-cut thing. Okay, now, if you want your finished product, so to speak, what's leaving the property, to be merchantable logs, in this case 13-footers, because that's what a Zippo mill is sort of optimum. You want to put your spar tree above the road, back from the road, and then run your line down to your truck, your winch that's on the road. And that's what you see in this photo there. My friend Bud is standing there, and that log's coming into the landing, and we're just about to drop it onto a stack of other logs. And come on. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. And I didn't hear it, but I can't hear it, the man.
I said variation on cross-haul logging where they used to dig
Jack is talking about cross-haul logging, and it's just something I have not heard of yet, but after the show, I'm going to ask him about it. But way back when. Okay. Anyway, so what you see that Bud is standing there where there's two logs that are allowing us to load this trailer with merchantable logs, 13-foot long, to make into boards. And by wrapping the choker several times around these logs and then just letting them go, it's very similar to a yo-yo when you were a little kid. You see how I'm doing that? I put the winch in reverse, so to speak, and I'm letting it out, and it's just slowly letting that big heavy log roll onto the trailer without breaking anybody's leg. I would not go much below 10 inches. And Doug fir is so strong. And anecdotally, I have one tree that I've been using as a spar tree for about 15 years, and it shows no signs of any kind of ill health in the crown or anything like that. And it's tremendous amount of logs have been pulled up by that tree. So you can, and it was about 12 where I applied the strap. Yeah. So a surprisingly small tree will hold up. Remember, in a winter storm, those trees, you know, the crown, you got tons of needles there being pushed back and forth by those storm winds. And that tree is designed to be strong enough to handle that. So a little thing like a winch with a load of logs on it, it just doesn't seem to bother them. So anyway, so that's the basic idea of how you load like a trailer or something. It's just not that complicated. It does take a lot of different measurements of how long of a piece of wire rope you need to get a certain thing done, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I guess those saw logs made up only about 10% of the volume that I have removed so far in this type of operation. The saw log part of it, the 13 footers, required at least half of the total work. It's just a lot of work to get these logs onto a trailer. So think hard before you do that, because firewood's just a lot easier. And here I'll show you what I think is next. Yes. So you don't have to do any math to cut a load of rounds, put them on the truck, and go trade them for eggs or whatever. It's easy. But getting a 13-foot, 600-pound log onto a trailer can get really complicated. Okay, let's see if the film clip works.
All right, Rich.
Okay, we're moving.
Let her rip. Got a little more. Stop. Yes.
That was the good part.
Yes, we're right at the bitter end on that.
It was the last 6 inches of line before the hook got all jammed up into the block, and we managed to figure it out so that it landed before that happened. I just feel like Steven Spielberg, man. I just think that's so cool. Anyway, okay. Yeah, how are we doing for time? Oh, we're good. So anyway, I hope everybody takes my point. These were beautiful gun barrel logs. It would have been a shame to cut them up into firewood, but it is a lot of work to do it as. Oh, sorry,
all right,
guys.
Rich.
Okay, we're moving.
Let her
Thank
rip.
you. Okay. Okay, so 90% of the volume removed went for firewood. That's on my particular thing I've been working on these last couple of years of wood around my house. And that 10% that was, again, real gun barrel logs, real straight, no knots, no taper, no pitch pockets, etc., went to Brad. And Brad has a mill, as you can see, and this mill's almost as old as Brad. And he just makes beautiful lumber, and he knows what he's doing. And that's my log on there, one of my logs on the carriage. And you can see that's some nice wood coming out of there. And there's Bud has all these tools in his place. That's a planer and makes beautiful lumber. And this is, Bud made this countertop. And I just think that's really cool. Here it is, May, now it's June now. And that was inside of a tree in February. That wood that went into that countertop. I just think it's cool. So anyway, spent 5 slides telling you how cool I thought that was, but that's all right. Anyway, it was nice lumber. Definitely not worth the effort. A lot of work. Okay, so fine. We're taking all these trees out, but what are we leaving? And I did some research on this. I found out that the Department of Fish and Wildlife recommends at least 6 trees per acre in mixed conifer forest, which is just about all of you in here in mixed conifer forest. And for hairy woodpecker, which is a very common woodpecker around my house, one source recommends 1.92 15-inch or greater hard snags per acre for mixed conifer. I know that's a mouthful, but what they're saying is around 2 trees per acre, 15 inches or bigger. And that seemed very reasonable to me. And I've got 16 after doing treatment and cutting all those trees that you saw in earlier photos and dealing with them. I still have 16, and there's more coming. The bugs haven't gone away, you know. So we're really okay in the snag department. If anything, I think we got too many. And of course, woody debris. Okay. Here you see I've burned a bunch of them in kind of a deck just because this was too far from a road. I just wanted to get rid of a portion of them. But I did some research on, of course, woody debris. It is very important to a number of critters. And I found that 98 cubic feet per acre of 9 to 20 inch diameter is recommended by the Pacific Northwest Experiment Station General Technical Report number 56. But there is tremendous variability. Now, I did a lot of plot work. I shouldn't be ashamed to admit it, but I worked for the Forest Service for 32 years. And then I had a little company, and we did a lot of plot work. You know, go out and we'll measure trees for food kind of thing. And I know that one of the things that varied more than anything else when I was doing measurements out there was coarse woody debris. The logs, you can go for a half a mile and not cross one single log that's greater than 9 inches. And then all of a sudden, you're in a patch where there's 400 lineal feet of those logs greater than 9 inches. Because 200 years ago, there was a blowdown event, or there was a little fire, or whatever. So it's extremely variable, coarse woody debris across the landscape. But I figure about 2/3 of a cord of logs per acre from all the research I've read would give you more than enough. And these are logs greater than 9 inches. The reason we use 9 inches is because that's the break for 1,000-hour fuels. And those are fuels that dry out very slowly in the spring and get wet again very slowly in the fall. And they're a really good habitat for a lot of critters. And they tend to be in the draws just because of the way the dynamics of the forest happen. And that is a really good location for them in most cases. You don't want them, the coarse woody that you leave, it's probably a good idea to avoid having a lot of them near a control feature, like a road. I got a road on my property that I would hope if the fire crew came, they'd say, hey, that's a good place to stop a fire, this fire that we're about to fight. And I know that that decision will be even easier for that fire crew if there's little or no coarse woody and little or no fine fuels right near that road, right? It's a control feature. You want it to be as sort of clean as possible. Yeah.
If there's a skipper available, could branches be chipped and provide benefits not needed to pile?
Yes, yes, and in fact, chipping is a really good option, especially if the material's still green. If you're cutting a tree that you know is going to get bugs, for example, that's really a good option. And there's all kinds of uses for chips on a piece of property. A couple inches of them will totally smother things like yellow star thistle. They won't be able to germinate. So they're great things to have. However, dry wood or stuff that's already dead, you'll find it's really difficult. The chipper just doesn't like the dry wood as much. It just takes a lot more. And also, I'd like to point out that the burning, the charcoal and the ash is very beneficial, and especially ecosystems like mixed conifer, where there's a lot of fire adaptation, not just the big pines and so forth, but right down to the mycorrhizal fungi level. They're fire-adapted species. So, but yeah, it's a choice you make based on a lot of factors, whether to chip or to burn. Go ahead. Sure. The only thing I can tell you is if you can kind of dig under the log and pound that sucker down with your single bit axe, pound the cone onto the end of the log, that will help a lot. But whoever said that, it sounds like they've used the cone, and that is one of the drawbacks. It's slippery, right? And that's good when you're going around a tree that you don't want to hurt, but it's bad when you're trying to get the damn thing to stay put. Yeah. Got any more? All right. So, anyway, yeah, the third thing is dead tree shade retention. And this is a very, very powerful thing that snags do is they have a major effect on the physics of that site, the energy relations of that site. The dead trees absorb all wavelengths of energy during the day. Sunlight goes in, long wave, short wave, everything in between goes into the tree. and does not come back out. But at night, that tree, that dead tree and the branches and all of that radiates long wave energy, sensible heat. And so what you get, the microclimate that results when you have a lot of dead shade on the site is warmer nights, cooler days. This is very important on some of the, I used to work doing post-fire assessments. And for example, on the Warner Creek fire, famous fire, very controversial, there were old clear cuts that had burned, and it was just burnt reprod, 5 foot high, little Christmas tree looking things. And then there was this big old growth fir and true fir and whatnot. And it was all dead, of course. It was all charred and killed. But when you walked from that dead forest, this is even in October when we were still mopping up this thing, you walk from that dead forest with all that dead shade into that dead burnt clear cut, it got 10 degrees warmer. Like you got 50 feet out into that clear cut. It was literally 10 degrees warmer because of this, the physics of dead shade. And what can I say? I took, back in 1980, I took microclimatology, and that really stayed with me, how powerful of an effect that is. And so when if you've got an opening, the reason I bring all this up, I've got all these little openings. Phanops bark beetle likes to kill little, less than 1/10 of an acre patch, right? It's not enough to where I need to plant it. It's not enough to where I need to worry a lot about a brush field coming up. There's just not enough light getting in there. But if you got a bigger hole, if you got like a ½ acre that's been killed by beetle or whatever, watch out for this, because you can make that site too hot for whatever you're planting. Or you can make that site so hot that all that'll grow there is manzanita and buckbrush and other things that have waxes, fats, and oils. You don't want them any more than you've already got them. So this is an important factor, this dead tree thing, if you've got a large opening that you're trying to deal with. Okay, and we are almost done. Okay, so one of the fascinating things about having these little less than 1/10 of an acre opening, and they've been opening up progressively more each year as more and more trees succumb to the flathead borer bark beetle, is I've got this tremendous resurgence of the herb layer. When all those fir trees were alive, they were about 120-year-old trees on my place. It was logged in 1904. It was so dark in there, there'd just be here and there, there'd be a iris, and it wouldn't flower every year. And, it was just kind of shady, typical stuff you'd find in the shade. Now, there's so many pretty face. The one on the right with the cool purple racing stripe in the middle of the petal there, that one's just everywhere now in the area that's where the trees have died. The Sodalcia, the wild hollyhock, there on the lower left, the pink one, that's enjoyed a tremendous upsurge. But the big one was the iris have just gone crazy. They're all flowering. A lot of them are double flowers, and they just obviously really like the additional light, the additional water. Something about that changed microenvironment has really appealed to them. So I've got this really wonderful herb layer now underneath these dead trees. So I guess my point is, although the bark beetle, the Phanops bark beetle on my property has been a bit of a disaster as far as making a bunch of work for me. And I'm not a young man. But what's next? I'm eager to see what happens to that piece of ground. And because it's mine, I own the property, I can do a few little experiments. That's why I bought the place in the first place. I'll try maybe planting some incense cedar or some of the more shade-tolerant critters. Try that. I'll try, if I see a lot of brush coming up, maybe I'll try an underburn. I already underburn on my property, etc. So I'm just saying, although generally the reason you're wanting to move wood, the reason you're at this presentation is because a bunch of trees have died. It's not totally a bad thing. Stuff happens. And that's it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you, Jack. I just really
No,
didn't know what you meant.
You know how easy it is to embarrass me, Rich. So cross-haul loading was a method of loading logs back in the 50s and extended into the 60s. And basically, when they were logging on a hillside, they would make a vertical cut so that the trucks could back into this little depression, and the log deck would be up above this depression. And they'd set the bunks up on one side of the truck, and then they just push the logs onto the truck through their
And they
chains.
just roll onto the truck.
They just roll onto the truck.
Yeah, well, that was before OSHA.
Yeah. Well, the reason I know all this is because I still have a cross-haul loading site on my property.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is cool. I'm glad you explained that. Yeah, yeah.
So Rich, I'm going to get this chat and then I'll let Bruce hear. Can you safely use a spar tree and winch to move logs downhill?
Yes, you can, but you have to be very aware of things getting wrapped around stumps and other trees, because gravity is going to try to move that log faster than you're pulling it with the cable. So you just have to be very aware of that and have your PV ready, because you're going to be unhooking some logs that are going to get wrapped around stumps and whatnot.
To what side angle can you pull to your spar tree? Like 45 degrees, or
That's a good question.
you use 2 blocks and you go from behind, or
Yeah.
how crazy?
What he's referring to is if you get too far away from the fall line, that's the direction of, say, if this was just a flat surface instead of a bunch of stumps and whatnot, a ball would roll like straight downhill. That's the fall line. Okay, you get more than about 30 degrees away from this fall line, you're going to start to get what they used to call siwash. That's where you start pulling your log up, and the force of gravity makes it start to roll sideways, and it can get very interesting in a hurry, and not in a good way. So yeah, about 25, 30 degrees is the most I've ever been able to do before it starts to siwash on me. And now you got a new cool term from old guy land.
Was that side wash?
No, siwash. I assume it
Siwash.
probably came from that, but SIWASSH is what it's called. And that's what it means. It means you got too far from the fall line, and now you're going to have to deal with that log rolling around and getting frisky.
Have you chatted with Max about the experiments that they're doing up at the Collins Forest with reseeding in the burn pile areas, with working with the Understory Initiative and putting in native understory species like these flowers and stuff? I was just up there and it looks great.
I'd love to read about that if any publications are forthcoming. I do know that there's a wonderful little paper came out of, I think it's Colorado State, whichever university in Colorado studies forests. And they were concerned about the burn pile scars, because if you get them hot enough, nothing grows back. You kill all the little corms and bulbs and whatnot, and you kill most of the mycorrhizal fungi. So you got a kind of a blank spot. It's very easy for noxious weeds to get started, for example. And they tried everything. They tried planting little pine seedlings in these burn scars, and some of them were big machine piles, so some of them were pretty good size. And they tried putting fertilizer in, and they tried putting like potting soil and mixing it in, and all kinds of things. And what worked the best was just taking a shovel full of dirt and duff and litter from the unburned a few feet away, with all of its insect eggs and seeds, grass seeds, and so forth, and just throw it into the middle of that burn. And not only would it reduce the alkaline nature of a burn scar, they tend to be very sweet, too sweet actually, the pH. But again, it supplied all these new life, seeds and mycorrhizal fungi and so forth. So that's what they found worked best at healing burn scars. I don't know why we got off on that, but there you go. And that's what they're doing. They're seeding them. That's a really good idea. Yeah.
Any other questions in the Zoom room or our room? We're all here in person. We get to chat.
Almost all of it, and I shouldn't. And I mean that seriously. In fact, up until this year, I never hired people. This year, I finally hired some people to fell, limb, and top. And by the way, Above and Beyond is a good outfit. They do a good day's work. I think both working by myself and what I do is if something's tricky, like falling a bad tree, I wait until the weekend when my wife's home, so that at least, hopefully my piteous screams will, or that's a good point. Well, I'm not well insured, so yeah. Exactly. But it is interesting that you bring that up, because another thing that I do, you saw the slide where I'm up 20 feet up in the tree, right? I really should be wearing a harness. And I know that, but I have priced a new harness, climber's harness with the belt that goes around the tree. And then you can just lean back and, whatever. It's a very safe way to do that stuff. But they're just incredibly expensive. So I haven't done it, and I know I should. Safety. Yes.
Rich, could you talk a little bit about setting a choker so that it rolls the log the way you want it to?
Well, yeah, that slide. That really tells the tale, where we're trying to let a log gently down from a deck. There. That, all you did was wrap that choker, unhook the choker, wrap it around about 6 times, hook it back up, and just put your winch in reverse. And it will just gently, 300, 400 pound log. Is that what you were asking?
Thank you, Rich. What I was asking about was the use of chokers when I've logged on a hillside, particularly, and I want to get around. There's one tree that's right in the way, and I want to get around it. So I set the choker so that when I get tension on it, it rolls that log 2 feet, and then I can pull it past that tree.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I have a trillium. I think it's the only one on the property, because my land is pretty dry for trillium. And I just did that. I just took a PV and stuck it in the ground with a stump propped up against it, and then hooked the choker much further down the log than I normally would have. And when I finally put tension on it with the winch, it went without squashing my trillium. So yes, you can. And the way to get a log onto the road, if your spar tree's on the downhill side of the road, which sometimes is unavoidable, and you want to get that log up to the road, you pull it all the way up with the choker set normally at the front of the log. You take the skidding cap off. You reset the choker down about halfway. You pull it up, and then reset the choker at the other end of the log, pull it up again, and it's on the road without you breaking a sweat. So this wire ropes, you can do anything. You really can. It's just amazing what all the stuff you can do if you got a couple blocks, and a winch, and a bunch of wire rope. Yeah, exactly. Where you apply the force. Yeah. And that's how you can mitigate a lot of the site damage too, is if you just take your time and reapply the force so it doesn't tear up your ground. And yeah. Anyway, yes, sir.
I was just gonna ask what size cable you typically use.
I use 3/8 wire rope. I've never had it break on me. I don't even find it ever has little breaks in the individual wires, those ones that stick into your hand. So 3/8, I swear by it. And I do think having 3 or 4 different chokers, having some chain that's a hook on one end, hook on the other, so you can just make up whatever length you need to apply your force to. So, yeah. And I must say, forestry suppliers down in Alabama or wherever they are, they're really good. They've got a wide selection. Baileys.com, everything for the woodcutter. They're pretty good. There's a rigger out here on Highway 62 who will make anything you want. You just come in and tell him, I want a hook on one end and a loop on the other, and it needs to be 80 feet long, and he won't even ask you why. He'll just do it. He'll just make it for you. So, yeah.
So talking about putting the choker where you want, do you have a secret tool? Because where you want to put the choker is always impossible to get it under the log.
Yeah, and that's why, good, there's a picture. You see Bud in the slide here. You see how he's got this yellow steel bar in his hand? That's this German peavey. It's an amazing piece of equipment. There it is again. It's a felling lever and a peavey. And the peavey, the hook part of the peavey, you can put it into a little slot and put it away kind of, so you can work on using it as a felling lever. But as a peavey, you just can't beat this thing. It's sort of infinitely adjustable, unlike the old-fashioned peaveys. And the steel bar is super strong. And that thing it just saves you an enormous amount of work. Because you can move really huge stuff if you got leverage, you know. Yeah, but if you can turn it over onto the choker is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Little metal thing that they dig through with, but I've never
Yeah.
seen one close up. I'm waiting for the guy that says, "Oh, I have that."
No, the guys I used to watch across from where we were burning a clear cut, the ones that were making the clear cut and were setting the chokers, they always had what they call a lady shovel. They used to call a lady shovel. I'm sure it's horribly misogynist, but it's a little short fire shovel leaning up against a tree, and they would just go dig a hole when they really couldn't get the knob to go under. They just dig. That was the only way they could do it. But with the size of logs I'm working with, a good peavey, like I say, look up that German steel Ochsenkopf or whatever it's called. You just roll it onto the choker, and then you got it made. Yeah.
There's another question here in the chat. My scenario is moving out live invasive trees that would need herbicide stump treatment when cut. Any advice? You've already commented on green chipping, which I'm grateful for.
So that's really interesting because with hardwoods, I assume it's unwanted hardwoods that are going to resprout. I have found that if I cut all the sprouts that are near the cut stump, but leave the ones that are furthest away, just one or two of them, the tree's roots will put all their energy into those one or two that aren't near the cut face, so they're not going to rot in a few years and be what they call a stool sprout. And those madrones will grow like 8-9 feet in 1 year because they're getting all the energy from the stump. And they'll quit making those really bushy stump sprouts that are a real fuel hazard, that are a real fire issue. So concentrating them all into one or two stems is one way to get around that, is what I'm saying. Yeah. But I don't know what the questioner wanted as an end result. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, if there aren't any, I'll ask you guys. How can I make this better? Should I have added a bunch of stuff about falling at the front end? I just assume most people know how to fall a tree, and about limbing and about how important it is to get the fine fuels piled and burned before you go messing with the logs. Any ideas?
I would just suggest a diagram showing how you can set a choker to make the water.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay. Yes, sir. Oh.
I lean toward not having a lot of trees on the ground, because I can't get them get them out. So I drop one and I pull it out. And what you're doing would seem to be that I'm not doing it right. Is it like just 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, or really you should drop everything first,
You're thinning.
get rid of the slash, and then
Yeah, that is actually how I think, because I'm trying to protect my house and my evacuation route. Yes, I want to get all the fine fuels, 0 to 3 inch material, piled and burned or chipped if it was, you know.
okay. Well, let
appropriate.
me ask this then. When you're done with your treatment, how many trees are left?
20
what-
live ones, 20, 25.
Because
maybe.
I'm okay, so I'm a lot thicker than that. I'm a newbie, and I learned in land steward or whatever to have a try and see what happens,
Uh-huh.
because the tree I saved dies, and
Well,
I cut
okay.
down the one that was going to live, and so I treated for a year, and then waited to see what falls in the snow and the wind and dies with sunburn even,
Uh-huh.
and then go back and do some more. So after I've got some logs down, I'm still very thick.
Right.
It's not like a complete treatment that you do it once and then hopefully you don't go back.
Well, I would suggest very strongly that even up your way at Glendale and on up there, where it's a little wetter and a little cooler, do Furby-Gone as your basic criteria for thinning. If you got a really nice looking fir standing next to a fairly crappy madrone, cut the fir, because they're just not long for this part of the world. I don't think, anyway. 2 degrees warmer turns out to be a big deal to these trees. I mean, it's just. I understand what you're saying. Okay.
The madrone is so thick and unhealthy that it's 40 foot tall with three leaves.
Yeah, there's something going on there. You were telling me
And
about
so
that
I'm
earlier.
taking the madrone out.
Okay, well, let me.
But it's yeah, I understand what you're.
Yeah, let me
you're saying.
amend that. If you got a really crappy sugar pine next to a nice fir, cut the fir, leave the sugar pine, because the sugar's got a better chance. From what I've seen, the Doug fir just are not tolerating this change condition. Or maybe it's just this drought, but I don't think so. It seems more long-term to me. And to Max. Max did the extension forester did a presentation the other day about this very subject, and that's kind of what he said was the fir's hurting.
Yeah, if you could repeat those numbers from the Little Applegate. I know just when I drive from Ashland, the hills up behind Talent, it's desperate. So
Yeah.
many dead trees up there.
Yeah, it looks to me like about every third fir is dead, and thank God, thank heavens, I've got 6, 7 different forest-sized trees on my property, and so almost every one of these holes created by the bark beetle is filling in with madrones and white oaks and ponderosa pine that have just been waiting for that additional light and so forth. But
Although I think when I came out to your place earlier, we talked about it a little bit too. A lot of the ponderosa pines are succumbing as
know.
well.
I know, and it's amazing to me that I don't want to get political, but I'm just saying the oil companies have known about this since the 80s, that this was going to happen. Why can't we send them a bill? How many number 2 saw logs have I turned into firewood when they were number 2 saw logs, $780 1,000, I think last time I looked, right? And they're gone. Why can't I send them a bill? It's a rhetorical question. And again, I'm sorry I got political. I was warned about that before this presentation. So yeah, the fir, well, everything you see in all these photos, all the dead trees that I've handled, they're all Douglas fir. Now, as Rachel points out, the pine doesn't look so good in a lot of places. That dendroctonous bark beetle is getting active there. And I've got, in my madrones, I've got madrone canker, and I've got some kind of wilty dieback thing that I don't even know what it is. So watch out. This warmer temperatures thing is not a good thing.
No, we don't have lots of sugar pine left around, at least in the forest that I'm in, but have you seen the sugar pine, or does it still look pretty good? It's
My
not,
sugars, a couple of them in the 19 years that I've owned that place, a couple of them have died from mountain pine beetle, I'm pretty sure. I've seen no evidence of blister rust, white pine blister rust. And they seem to be doing pretty well, which surprises me. Because I'm at a low elevation. They're not even really supposed to be there. And I've got one that's 17 inches in diameter. Nice. 2,000 even. But we're lucky. We get about 25 inches of rain. And Silvix of North America says sugar pines don't grow where there's 25 inches of rain. So north. Yeah, that's why. But that's also why I got all these 120-year-old Doug firs that are dying, because it's mostly north slope. Yeah, northwest.
I didn't mention it. Well, I'm just getting together the planning for our field land steward training, because I didn't do our introduction here. But this fall in September, we're going to have our land steward training, which Bruce mentioned, and we're probably going to go, I was just talking with Rich about that. We're probably going to go out to Rich's place. He's done some prescribed burns out there, worked with the Rogue Valley Prescribed Burn Association, and lots of, really a great property of that kind of tinkering and experimenting, that like ecological tinkering. Yeah. Lots to learn out there.
Big fun. Big fun. All right. I think they've suffered enough. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. You've got some thank yous here in the chat as well. I will close the Zoom here in a minute. Folks can leave as they like. And here in the room, we'll just gather things up and hope to see you next time. We'll get better at this hybrid presenting too. That wasn't too bad though in the end.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. You got that flash drive somewhere? Yeah. That's why I like the ones with the cap. Because you put the cap in your pocket, yeah.